You know that feeling when you check your savings and realize the numbers aren't keeping up with the real world? You feel safe, then prices jump again, so you are right back where you started. The thing is, this isn't just bad luck. It's not just the cost of living rising. It's the result of decisions you are making, specifically the decisions you are avoiding. There are invisible traps in the dollar-only mindset. These traps keep you locked in a fading system. Once you see them, they are impossible to ignore. Here is how you finally get unstuck.
The first myth you need to dismantle is the idea that the US dollar is a permanent safety net. It's a harsh realization, but it's the direct result of specific numbers you're probably ignoring. Most people assume that because the dollar has been the king for 80 years, it will stay the king forever. But that's one of the biggest traps right there. Think about it mathematically. Our national debt has officially crossed $36 trillion. That's not just a big number on a screen. It's a weight on every single bill in your wallet. When 15% of the entire federal budget is spent just on interest payments, the math stops working in your favor. It means the government has zero financial incentive to keep the dollar strong. Increasing the money supply is the only way to pay for that debt, which means your savings are being diluted by design. And the crazy part is that the rest of the world has already noticed. They are not waiting for us to catch up. The IMF just reported that the US dollar's share of global reserves has slipped to 57%. That is the lowest level in modern history. A few decades ago, it was over 70%. Central banks aren't just talking about diversifying, they are actually doing it. This is just capitalism. Money flows to where it is most valued and least at risk. If you stay entirely in the dollar, you are betting against the data. You're essentially holding an IOU from an entity that is spending more on interest than it does on almost anything else. It sounds counterintuitive to bet against your own currency, but staying comfortable is expensive. When the foundation starts to crack, the smartest thing you can do is look at the exits. The unipolar world is dying, and your wealth is currently trapped in the middle of that collapse. You aren't just losing money to inflation anymore, you are losing it to a systemic shift in the global order. Staying put is a choice, and right now, it is a very expensive one.
I know someone named John, a 45-year-old project manager in Austin, Texas. He did everything right. He maxed out his 401k and kept it all in U.S. stocks and bonds. In 2025, his balance went up by 10%. He felt successful. But when he went to buy a house or even just groceries, he realized his buying power was actually lower than the year before. The loss of the dollar's value against imported goods was faster than his portfolio's growth. John was getting rich on paper, but poor in reality. He was a victim of the safe haven trap. This one drives me crazy because it's so easily fixable. You don't need a PhD in economics to protect yourself. You just need to stop thinking like a consumer and start thinking like a central bank. If you look at the data, central banks in countries like China and India aren't hoarding cash. They bought over 1,000 tons of gold in the last year alone. They know that when paper money becomes unreliable, real assets are the only shield. You can do the exact same thing using the 10-10-10 rule. The first step is to move 10% of your portfolio into physical gold or gold ETFs like GLD. This is your insurance policy against systemic failure. When the dollar drops, gold typically moves in the opposite direction. It's the ultimate defense. Next, you need to take another 10% and put it into international stocks that aren't tied to the U.S. market. Look at funds like VXUS. This allows you to profit from the growth of the other 57% of the global economy. If the U.S. hits a recession while emerging markets thrive, you are covered. Finally, put the last 10% into real assets or commodities. This could be real estate or energy funds. These are things the world actually needs to function, regardless of what currency is being used. Wait until you hear this. While you're worried about your local bank, the BRICS nations have already processed 25% of their trade using a system called M-Bridge. They're bypassing the dollar entirely. If the biggest economies on Earth are building a shield, why aren't you? You don't have to move your entire life. You just have to move 30% of your wealth into things that the U.S. government cannot print. It takes 15 minutes to set up these positions, but those minutes could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars over the next decade. Most people think that investing outside of the United States is too risky, but the reality is that staying internal is the biggest risk of all. You have to understand how the income ladder works on a global scale. In the old world, every road led to New York. In the new world, growth is becoming decentralized. This is what we mean by a multipolar world. When you look at the data, the emerging markets are growing at twice the rate of the G7 nations. Capital follows growth. That is the fundamental rule of capitalism. If you are only invested in the US, you are missing out on the fastest growing middle class in human history. Think about it like this. If you were a business owner, would you put all your products in one store that is already at its peak? Or would you want to be in the new markets that are just opening up? Staying in your lane is a recipe for stagnation. Most managers try to keep their costs down, and currently the cost of the U.S. economy is rising. High interest rates and high debt make for a sluggish giant. Meanwhile, the countries in the BRICS Plus bloc are building their own infrastructure, their own payment systems, and their own trade routes. They are no longer asking for permission to earn more. They are creating their own opportunities. The people who effortlessly climb the wealth ladder are the ones who see these shifts before they become mainstream. They don't wait for the news to tell them it's safe. They follow the math. By the time everyone realizes that the dollar is no longer the sole king, the premium for being early will be gone. You'll just be trading one stagnant asset for another. The person who moves every few years into the highest growth sectors always ends up in a different income bracket than the person who stays loyal to one system. Staying comfortable is expensive. And in 2026, being comfortable with a one-currency portfolio is the most expensive mistake you can make. The world has moved on. It's time for your money to do the same. So there you have it. You can keep hoping that things will get better on their own. You can keep looking at your 401k balance and pretending that inflation isn't eating your future. Or you can start escaping these traps one by one. You can start thinking like a professional who understands market value in global shifts. The unipolar world where the dollar was the only game in town is over. We are now in a world of many players and many opportunities. The choice is really up to you. You can stay in your lane and wonder why you never seem to get ahead, or you can build a portfolio that matches the reality of 2026. I guarantee that in 5 years, the person who diversified into a multipolar shield will be in a completely different financial position than the person who stayed put. Don't wait for permission to be wealthy. You have to decide it yourself. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if this helped you see the truth. It's time to make things better.